Welcome to the Lion's Share podcast, where we break down today's most impactful research and bring fresh insights from the academic frontier straight to you.
Ralph Waldo Emerson, American essayist, philosopher, and apparently the author of the most dangerous piece of business advice in history.
That is a strong claim right out of the gate.
Well, you know the quote I'm talking about. The whole, if a man can write a better book or make a better mousetrap than his neighbor, the world will make a beaten path to his door.
Right. It is a beautiful sentiment. I mean, it appeals to our sense of cosmic justice that merit wins out, that quality naturally rises to the top like cream. But if you look at the actual history of innovation, Emerson wasn't just optimistic. He was arguably dead wrong.
Exactly. And that is exactly where we're starting today. We're looking at the brutal reality that building the better mousetrap is usually the easy part. The hard part, the part that actually keeps the lights on, is getting paid for it.
Which is something we see all the time in venture creation. The history of business is basically a graveyard of better mousetraps that failed to make a dime for their inventors.
It really is. Like, think about the Hydrox cookie.
Oh, classic example.
Right. They invented the chocolate sandwich cookie with the vanilla creme feeling way before Nabisco did, but Nabisco came along with the Oreo, had a totally different market structure and better distribution, and basically crushed them.
Or take the CAT scanner.
Yeah.
EMI, the music company, interestingly enough, invented it. It was this massive Nobel Prize-winning medical breakthrough. But GE and Siemens ended up capturing almost all the financial value because they dominated the hospital supply chains.
So today we're going on a deep dive into the mechanics of why that happens, and more importantly, how to stop it from happening to you. We're analyzing a really seminal paper from the California Management Review by Gary Pisano and David Teese. It's titled, How to Capture Value from Innovation.
And because we want to get really tactical on the business modeling side of things, we are pairing that with Stefan Michel's Harvard Business Review piece, Capture More Value.
It's a powerful combination. Pisano and Teese are asking this massive research question that kind of frames our entire discussion. Basically, can managers actively shape the environment, like the legal rules and the industry structure, to ensure they win? Or are we all just victims of the market?
I love that framing. It shifts the mindset from just opportunity recognition, which we talk about so much in entrepreneurship, to opportunity shaping. We aren't just playing the game, we are rewriting the rules of the game.
So let's unpack this. Where do we even start?
We have to start with the foundation. This paper builds on the Profiting from Innovation Framework, or PFI, which originated out of UC Berkeley. The core puzzle PFI tries to solve is, why do the owners of the bottleneck assets usually win rather than the actual inventors?
Bottleneck assets. That sounds like highway traffic. What does that mean in a business context?
Think of it as the choke point in the value chain. If you invent a new hyper-efficient engine, that's great. That's the innovation. But to sell it, you need a factory to build it, a distribution network to ship it, and trained mechanics to service it. Those are what Teese calls complementary assets.
Got it.
So if those assets are hard to get, if they are a bottleneck, the person who owns them has the leverage, not the person holding the patent for the engine.
Okay, so if I'm a startup founder or an innovator and I don't own the factory or the distribution, I'm vulnerable. I'm essentially just a supplier to the guy who holds the real power.
Precisely. And this is where Pisano and Teese completely flip the script. They argue that you don't just have to accept that industry structure as fixed, you can actually pull two massive strategic levers to change who holds the power: the appropriability regime and the industry architecture.
Let's take the first one, appropriability regime. It sounds like something from a dystopian sci-fi novel, but it's essentially about intellectual property, right?
It includes IP, but it's a bit broader. The appropriability regime simply refers to the environmental factors that determine how easily an innovation can be imitated.
Okay.
So it's a combination of legal protection like patents and copyrights, and natural barriers, like how mathematically hard the tech is to reverse engineer.
So a strong regime means it's hard to copy me. A weak regime means it's easy.
Correct. Pharmaceuticals generally operate in a strong regime. You have a patent, and the chemistry is incredibly complex. A restaurant recipe, on the other hand, is a weak regime. Anyone can taste it and try to copy the ingredients.
Makes sense.
Now, here is the counterintuitive finding from the paper, and this is where it gets really fascinating for anyone doing business model innovation. Most people assume you always want a strong regime. You want to lock down your IP, sue everyone, and build a fortress.
Right, protect the castle. That seems like business 101, especially in corporate venturing.
But Pisano and Teese argue that sometimes the smartest strategic move is to actually weaken the intellectual property protection.
Wait, you want to make it easier for people to copy you? Why on earth would you do that?
To prevent a competitor from creating a bottleneck that locks you out, the paper uses the case of Merck, the pharmaceutical giant, and the Merck Gene Index.
Ah, I remember reading this part. This was back in the 90s during the whole genomics boom.
Right. There were all these early-stage biotech startups trying to patent gene sequences. They wanted to own the basic building blocks of life, which are the upstream assets in this scenario.
Right, the raw materials of biology.
Merck looked at this and realized that if these startups locked up the patents on gene sequences, it would completely strangle drug discovery. Every single time Merck wanted to develop a cure, they'd have to negotiate a license just to study the gene.
So the gene sequences themselves were becoming the bottleneck.
Exactly. And Merck makes money by selling the actual drugs. That's their downstream asset. They needed the upstream basic science to be completely open. So what did they do? They funded a massive project to sequence genes, and this is the key. They published the data in the public domain within 48 hours of finding it.
They gave it away. They spent millions of dollars in R&D just to give the data away for free.
They gave it away. This is what legal scholar Robert Merges calls a property preempting investment, or a PPI. By putting the information into the public domain, they made it prior art.
Which means no one else can patent it.
Exactly. The biotech startups couldn't patent it anymore. Merck deliberately weakened the appropriability regime of the gene sequences to ensure that the path remained clear for them to use their manufacturing and marketing muscle, their complementary assets, to win the drug game.
That is some 4D chess right there.
They
They spent money to destroy value upstream so they could capture value downstream.
It's brilliant. And we see this exact same dynamic with IBM and Linux, too. IBM generates billions in services and hardware. They realized that if Microsoft kept a stranglehold on the operating system, the OS, being the bottleneck in computing IBM, would always get squeezed.
So IBM poured money into Linux, the open source OS.
Right. They commoditized the OS. They made the software free so they could sell the expensive servers and the IT consulting.
They shifted the value from the software, where Microsoft was strong, to the services, where IBM was strong.
Exactly.
This feels like a vital lesson for corporate innovators and even lean startups. Sometimes you need to break the lock on the door so you can sell the furniture inside.
That is a great way to put it.
Which brings up a really crucial guiding question for you listening right now. If you are a startup with a weak IP position, what bottleneck asset can you actually control to ensure you aren't crushed by imitators? You have to figure out where your leverage actually is.
Because if you don't, you're just doing R&D for your competitors.
Okay, so that's lever 1, IP strategy and the appropriability regime. Let's look at lever 2, industry architecture. The paper talks a lot about vertical versus modular industries.
Yes, this is all about the division of labor across an industry. In a vertical industry, one firm basically makes everything. Think of the old IBM mainframe days. They made the chips, the hardware, the operating system, the software, and they even did the repairs. It was a completely integral architecture.
And a modular industry.
That's like the modern PC industry or the bicycle industry. You have standard interfaces. One guy makes the frame, another makes the gears, another makes the tires. You can just plug and play.
So the strategic question for venture design is, do I want to be in a vertical world or a modular world?
It entirely depends on what you own. If you own the bottleneck asset, you generally want a modular world because it encourages fierce competition in all the other parts of the stack.
Break that down a bit more.
Sure. If I make the only engine that works, I want 10 different companies making car bodies because that competition lowers the price of the car body, which ultimately drives up demand for my engine.
Right. The paper uses the battle between WiMAX and Qualcomm to illustrate this. This was a fascinating breakdown of how standards wars are really just architecture wars in disguise.
It really is. So Qualcomm dominated the mobile world with CDMA technology. It was a proprietary closed system. They owned the IP, so they collected royalties on every single phone. It was a nice, highly profitable vertical lock.
And Intel wanted to break that lock.
But Intel doesn't make phones. They make chips. So Intel pushed WiMAX, which was an open standard.
They rallied Samsung, Motorola, and everyone else to join this open WiMAX forum.
Right. Intel's goal wasn't to own the wireless standard. They wanted to open up the architecture, make it modular, so that the bottleneck would shift back to the processor, which is exactly what Intel sells. They wanted to commoditize the airwaves to sell more silicon.
But there's a massive risk here, right? If you make an industry too modular, doesn't it just become a race to the bottom for everyone?
It absolutely can. The authors point to the movie industry as a cautionary tale. It is highly modular. Studios assemble a team for a project. the actors, directors, scriptwriters, and then disband when the movie is done. But the studios don't actually make the lion's share of the profit because they don't own the bottleneck.
The stars are the bottleneck.
The stars are the bottleneck. They are the scarce, non-reproducible resource. So the massive value flows to the Brad Pitts and the Meryl Streeps, not the studios that organize the modular pieces.
So if you break up the architecture, you have to be absolutely sure you aren't breaking the only thing that allows you to capture profit.
Exactly. And this leads to another really important question for our listeners to ask themselves. Is your industry currently vertical or modular? And would breaking it up, modularizing it, actually favor your specific position?
Or another one, are you investing enough in systems integration capabilities if your industry is becoming too modular? Because if everything is plug and play, someone still has to make it all work together smoothly.
That is exactly where TC's concept of dynamic capabilities comes in. The ability to sense these shifts in architecture and reconfigure your assets to match.
This feels like a really good moment to pivot to the more tactical side. We've talked about these grand macro strategies reshaping laws and entire industries, but let's say I'm not IBM or Intel. Let's say I'm an entrepreneur inside a mid-sized company or a founder launching a product next month. How do I apply this?
This is where Stéphane Michel's work on capturing more value becomes essential. Michel is great because he moves from the structural to the transactional. He says it's not just about what you sell, but how you price it. He focuses heavily on changing the price carrier.
The price carrier. This is one of those business model innovation terms that once you hear it, you suddenly see it everywhere.
It really is. The price carrier is simply the specific part of the product or service bundle that actually carries the price tag.
Cool.
The classic textbook example is Nespresso.
Right.
Before Nespresso, coffee was just a commodity. You bought it by the bag. The carrier was the kilo of roasted beans.
And beans are notoriously cheap.
Very cheap.
Yeah.
Nespresso completely changed the carrier. They stopped selling coffee by weight and started selling the pod experience. By packaging it into single servings, they effectively raised the price of coffee from about $19 per kilo to roughly $137 per kilo.
That is an insane markup. And the crazy thing is, the customer doesn't even feel it because the unit of analysis changed. I'm just paying 80 cents for a perfect morning moment, not $137 for a bag of powder.
Exactly. They innovated the price carrier. We see this with Netflix versus Blockbuster, too. Blockbuster's price carrier was the rental, the per-night transaction. And that model relied heavily on late fees, which made customers actively hate them.
I certainly did.
Netflix changed the carrier to the subscription, monthly access. It aligned the value capture with the customer's actual desire for convenience, rather than punishing them.
Michel also talks about changing the payer entirely, and I think this connects beautifully back to the PFI framework about knowing who holds the value.
Right. Sometimes the person actually using the product has no money, or simply no willingness to pay. Vestergaard's LifeStraw is a heartbreaking but brilliant example of this in the venture space.
Yes, tell the story.
So they invented this portable straw that filters out 99.9% of bacteria and parasites from water. It literally saves lives in developing nations. But the villagers who desperately need it cannot afford it.
So you have this massive value creation happening, but zero value capture capability from the end user.
Exactly. So they changed the payer. They realized that by using the LifeStraw, villagers didn't have to cut down trees to boil water over a fire. That saves massive amounts of carbon emission.
Wow.
Vestergaard got the project certified for carbon credits. They gave the straws away for free in Kenya and sold the carbon credits to giant corporations in the West to offset their emissions.
That is incredible. They essentially monetize the absence of smoke.
It's a perfect example of looking at the entire ecosystem to find where the money is flowing. If you can't get paid by the user, who else benefits from the user having your product?
I want to pause here and do a bit of a thinking aloud walkthrough, because we've covered a lot of heavy DBA level theory today. We have appropriability, architecture, price carriers. But let's play devil's advocate for a second. Please do.
Is this industry-shaping stuff really feasible for an early-stage venture? Pisano and Teese talk about Intel and Merck. If I'm two people in a garage running lean startup experiments, I can't exactly lobby Congress to change patent laws or force Samsung to adopt my technical standard.
That is a completely fair critique. The sheer weight required to shift an established industry architecture is immense. However, the paper references Santos and Eisenhart, who argue that entrepreneurs actually can shape markets, but they have to do it when the cement is wet.
When the field is nascent.
Exactly. When a new technology emerges, like generative AI right now, the rules aren't written yet. The architecture hasn't settled into vertical or modular. A startup that moves fast to establish a platform or an open standard can dictate the terms for decades. Think of how OpenAI is trying to become the base layer platform on which everyone else builds. They're trying to set the architecture while the cement is wet.
So the lesson is, don't try to reshape the automobile industry. It's hardened concrete. But if you're in a brand new field, you have to act like a giant before you are one. And this ties back to effectuation versus causation. Don't just analyze a given market and try to fit into it. Use the resources you have to actively co-create the market structure with early partners. Ask yourself, are you pricing the product or the value? And could you actually benefit by weakening the patent protection in your field to commoditize a competitor's advantage?
That brings up a massive tension, though. Open innovation versus value capture. We are told constantly in innovation management to be open, share data, build ecosystems. But if you share everything, how do you eat?
That is the central tension of the digital age. The anti-commons theory warns us that if there are too many patents, nothing gets done because of gridlock. But if there are no patents, no one invests. The synthesis here is what we call strategic openness.
Strategic openness.
Yes, you open the parts of the stack that you don't monetize, specifically to drive traffic and scale to the parts of the stack that you do monetize.
Like giving away the razor handle to sell the blades.
Or giving away the search engine to sell the ads. Google is an absolute master of this. And they don't even set the ad prices. They run an auction. That is another pricing mechanism innovation Mikkel talks about. They let the market decide the price, which reveals the customer's true willingness to pay.
It's fascinating. We usually think of innovation as the engineers in the R&D lab holding a test tube or writing code. But what we are saying today is that the business model designer is just as much of an inventor.
I would go a step further. I would say that without the business model innovation, the technical innovation is just philanthropy. And while philanthropy is a noble pursuit, it's not a sustainable corporate strategy.
Let's wrap this up by distilling some key terms for our listeners to take away. If you're at a networking event with a venture capitalist, what are the core concepts you need to drop to sound like you truly understand market strategy? Let's do 3 or 4.
All right. First, the appropriability regime. Remember, it's not just about filing patents. It's the entire environment dictating how easy it is to copy you. Strong regime equals hard to copy. Weak regime equals easy to copy.
Got it.
Second, complementary assets. These are all the extra things you need to make your core innovation valuable, like distribution, service networks, manufacturing at scale. If you don't own them, you better have an airtight relationship with the person who does.
Because they own the bottleneck.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And third, property preempting investments, or PPIs. Yeah. This is the strategic judo move of spending money to put information into the public domain, specifically to stop a competitor from patenting it and blocking your path.
And I'll add one from Stefan Michel's work, the price carrier. What is the actual price tag attached to? Is it the printer or the ink? The raw coffee beans or the pod experience? Innovate that and you change the entire margin profile.
That is an excellent list to keep in mind.
So bringing it all together into some actionable takeaways, what is the manager's mandate here based on all this research?
For the startup founders, stop obsessing exclusively over product features. Obsess over who owns the complementary assets in your ecosystem. If you don't own the distribution channel and you have weak IP, you are going to lose, no matter how elegant your mousetrap is.
And for the corporate innovators,
use your size. Reshape the architecture. Ask yourself if you can force a modular standard that commoditizes your agile competitor's advantage. Can you make their proprietary tech obsolete by making an open alternative the industry standard?
And above all, remember that value creation does not automatically equal value capture. You can create billions in value for society, like the invention of the internet protocol itself, and capture almost none of the financial upside if the architecture isn't set up in your favor.
That is the ultimate reality check for any innovator.
I want to leave you with a final thought to chew on today. Look at any modern org chart. Most companies have a chief technology officer. They have a chief marketing officer. But almost no one has a chief market structure officer.
That is incredibly true.
We spend millions of dollars inventing the physical thing, but $0 inventing the market structure that will actually pay for the thing. So what if you moved your absolute best engineers out of the product lab and asked them to design your business model instead? What if the better mousetrap isn't a mechanical device at all, but a completely new way of selling pest control?
Now that is a deep dive worth taking.
Thanks for listening. Go capture some value.
Thanks for tuning into the Lion's Share podcast. If you enjoyed today's discussion, share it with a friend and join us next time for more ideas worth talking about. We'll see you next time.